Esther Gitu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. The U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield talks about the future of ECOWAS after Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger say they are leaving the bloc. The World Food Programme operating in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo says poor populations face inadequate food supplies as the organization faces a critical funding gap. And South Africa's 2023 Kalahari Arts and Heritage Festival is being hailed by organizers as a resounding success. The San and Khoi communities entertained guests with music, dance, poet and drama. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Trade, geopolitics and the lives of millions of people could all be affected if Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger all leave the West African bloc, ECOWAS. David Doyle reports.
Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger have said they are quitting West Africa's economic and political bloc, ECOWAS. The move by three countries who underwent coups in recent years could potentially reverse decades of integration, with profound implications for the region. Firstly, there's ECOWAS. Despite sanctions, negotiations and threats of military intervention, the 15-member bloc had already not managed to push Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali into a timetable for returning to democracy.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely weakens ECOWAS.
Andrew Leibovich is a research fellow at the Klingendahl Institute's Conflict Research Unit.
So already ECOWAS appeared very weak. Some people saw ECOWAS and see ECOWAS as very ineffectual. And so certainly this undermines ECOWAS even more.
As they announced their departure, the three junta-led countries accused ECOWAS of abandoning its founding ideals and falling under foreign influence. But there could also be significant ramifications for Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. There's the region's trade and services flows, worth nearly $150 billion a year. Niger, for example, relies on its richer neighbour and current ECOWAS chair, Nigeria, for 80% of its trade, according to Siddiq Abba, president of the Paris-based Sires think tank. Quitting ECOWAS is the silliest own goal since the United Kingdom voted for Brexit, said the head of macro strategy at London-based FIM Partners, Charlie Robertson. He said the three countries were already among the poorest in the world and that together they accounted for just 8% of the bloc's GDP. Now increased tariffs and new restrictions on the movement of goods, money and people could be on the way. And that has a potential impact on millions of Malians, Burkinabes and Nigerians who settled in neighbouring states. Ivory Coast alone is home to more than 5 million people from the three nations. For now, those diasporas enjoy visa-free travel and the right to work. But this dispute is also one with significance beyond West Africa's borders. Russia has been expanding its regional influence at the expense of Nigeria, the United States, and former colonial power France. That includes through varying degrees of military cooperation with Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, who had complained that ECOWAS offered little support to tackle jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel. The process of leaving the bloc could take time, leaving the door open for negotiation. But for now, what has been exposed through the ECOWAS crisis is a growing rift between Western-backed elected governments and military-run nations who are increasingly turning to the likes of Russia.
David Doyle of Reuters with that report. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield has returned from a three-nation tour of West Africa. She visited Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone and Liberia. Her visit came as the economic community of West African states face an uncertain future following the decision by Mali, Burkina Faso and Nigeria to leave the regional bloc. Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield spoke to VOA's Heidi Adams, who asked her whether she thinks the bloc is at risk of falling apart.
Ambassador, I want to ask you about news from West Africa over the weekend. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger quitting the Economic Community of West African States. Now, these are founding members of ECOWAS. The bloc was, of course, also founded on these ideas of integration and regional cooperation. But if you look at the trends of successive coups in parts of West Africa, is ECOWAS at risk of falling apart?
You know, ECOWAS has historically been a strong regional organization in West Africa. They played a pivotal role in ending the civil wars in both Liberia and Sierra Leone. And they have played a strong role in bringing the countries of West Africa together on economic migration and other issues. The decisions made by Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali is really, that decision is really unfortunate because it further isolates them from their neighborhood. It isolates them from other democracies in the region. And it shows that the actions that they are taking are actions that are only in their interests, but not in the interests of the people of these three countries. So again, I think this is unfortunate. I think ECOWAS will remain strong. It will continue to address issues across the board, and I hope at some point that they can convince these three countries to come back into the fold. Being outside the fold is not in their interest, and it's not in the interest of their people.
That was U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield speaking to VOA's Heidi Adams, host of Straight Talk Africa. You can catch the full interview at voaafrica.com. As worldwide conflicts rise, humanitarian organizations are facing a critical funding gap to assist millions of people in need around the world. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, poor populations are facing inadequate assistance on food security, rising child malnutrition, and gender-based violence. The World Food Programme, operating in eastern DRC, says it is facing a critical funding gap of more than $546 million to continue full-scale humanitarian assistance to one of the world's largest humanitarian crises. The WFP says due to limited resources in recent years, it has only reached one-third of the acutely food insecure populations in eastern DRC. As a result of the dwindling funds, the organization says it may not meet nutritional needs of those who need it most. For more on what the funding gap means for those in dire need of assistance, I'm joined live via Skype from Kinshasa by Shirley Thakral, World Food Programme's DRC spokesperson. Shirley, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, how is WFP addressing the growing needs of Congolese civilians despite this funding gap?
We call it extreme prioritization. So when you have more than 6 million people now who've been displaced by the conflict, and that's probably one of the largest displacement crises in the world, and it's not a badge of honor, it's not a badge that anybody wants to be proud of. But we have no choice but to prioritize assistance. So we're providing full rations to the worst affected people for the next 6 months, rather than spreading ourselves too thinly so that no one is not adequately served. And as you mentioned, you know, there is a sort of $1 million tag in terms of what we need to provide food and nutrition to 1.5 million in the East, and that's 397 million. And it's tough when you've got other crises, when you've got Sudan on our doorstep, South Sudan, Yemen, Gaza, Ukraine. It's a really tough time for donors and for the humanitarian agencies and for the people that we need to reach.
Shirley, eastern part of DRC, we know, has been plagued with the militia groups that have killed and displaced a lot of civilians there. But what percentage of civilians in dire need is WFP able to reach?
So WFP is the largest humanitarian agency on the ground, and when we have the logistics, the air capacity, the trucks to get to people, but it's access. Access is always really hard in conflict. Access so that we can negotiate to get food to people, and especially children who are the most vulnerable. And as I mentioned, you know, this is also country which is resource rich. You've got land that is very fertile. So when you do have conflicts and people are forced to leave their land, it's really hard, because you are basically forcing them into a situation where they're living in very makeshift camps with very little shelter, with very little protection. So, the numbers that we know we want to reach in 2024 is over 3 million. We managed to reach 3.4 in 2023. But again, it's really just about, can we overcome the access issues and the other challenges, poor infrastructure, poor roads, and also climate change.
Shirley, what would be the implications if humanitarian organizations such as yours do not get enough funding?
I think the answer is very simple. I mean, people will have to go without, very essential food. I mean, everybody has the right to food, has the right to be able to have access to food, and especially in a country which I mentioned is abundant, it's rich and abundant in natural resources, and yet 20% of the population in this country is facing hunger. So it really is, it feels like a resource curse in this country, where the demand for the country's natural resources such as cobalt, gold, copper is high worldwide. The way we're talking to each other today is probably because of resources from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but the wealth doesn't trickle down to the poorest.
Shirley, many thanks for talking to us and what you're doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Shirley Thakral is the World Food Programme's DRC spokesperson. Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is vowing to continue the war between the military and the paramilitary rapid support forces, rejecting the latest peace efforts. Burhan also criticized leaders of African countries, including South Africa, Ethiopia and Kenya, who received the RSF head Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo as a statesman during recent visits. In an interview with VOA Swahili reporter Huba Abdi, Kenya's Prime Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, Musalia Mudavadi, dismissed any perception that Kenya is taking sides in the Sudan conflict.
Kenya is neutral in this process, and Kenya would like to see a peaceful resolution to the Sudan crisis. Both parties have been to Nairobi. Burhan has been to Nairobi, and so has Dagalo been to Nairobi. So it is not, you cannot now wake up and say that there's one entity that is favored against the other. And the other point I would like to point out is that, during the non-aligned movement sessions, there was a meeting of IGAD on the sidelines. And the factions in Sudan were invited in Kampala. And Dagalo came, but Burhan did not. But this was an IGAD meeting. The chairman of the African Commission was present, and he also indicated that he had nominated 3 individuals or 3 envoys to be part of the peace process, to work in conjunction with IGAD.
That was Musalia Mudavadi, Kenya's Prime Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, speaking to VOA Swahili reporter Huba Abdi. Libyan authorities have started sending more than 320 irregular migrants back to their Nigerian homeland. VOA's Paul Ndiho has the story.
Wharton, Libya is a key departure point on North Africa's Mediterranean coast for African migrant departures to Europe. Migrants are often risking dangerous sea voyages in hopes of reaching Europe for a better life. Libya's rival administrations last year agreed on a Tripoli-based anti-immigration group tasked with coordinating deportations of foreigners who are in the country illegally. According to the International Organization for Migration, there are more than 700,000 migrants in Libya. In a move coordinated with IMO, 160 Nigerians are being sent back home from Benina Airport in Benghazi. Since 2011, more than a decade of violence and instability, the overthrow and killing of Muammar Gaddafi has turned the country into a fertile ground for humanitarian traffickers. Smugglers and traffickers have long been accused of abuses. In 2015, the UN-affiliated IMO established a voluntary humanitarian return plan arranging and financing travel for migrants and asylum seekers in Libya, wishing to live for their respective countries of origin. Last year, nearly 10,000 people left under the program, down from just over 11,000 in 2022, according to IMO figures. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
It's time for Africa Cup of Nations update, and joining me live via Skype from Abidjan, Ivory Coast, is VOA's Alvaro Andrade. Alvaro, give us a recap of the games.
Hi, Esther. It's good to be with you again. Today was the day of press conference before the quarterfinals starting tomorrow. The first pre-game press conference was with Angola and a Nigerian coach. Both of them are confident to the game tomorrow and to win. And surprisingly, the Angolan coach says they want to be immortal, which means they want to win the cup AFCON this year. But Pedro Gonçalves recognized Angola is playing against African colossus in football. The other side, the Nigerian coach Jose Peseiro said there are 50% of possibility for both teams. Therefore, he said Nigeria is also ready to win the game tomorrow. I know with the Nigerian player Iwabi, he claimed it's important for the Super Eagles to maintain their style of playing against Angola because both teams want to qualify for semi-final, quote, Iwabi. In the second press conference, both coaches say they respect their opponent, but all of them are confident for tomorrow. The Democratic Republic coach, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sebastian Desabre, said there are no favorites, but on the other side, the Guinea coach Kaba Yamura said he was very confident in the team. He said that even though DRC eliminated Egypt, Guinea will win tomorrow. Almost everybody is confident for tomorrow, but until tomorrow, we're going to see what happens in Abidjan.
We are all waiting, Alvaro. Thank you very much. VOA's Alvaro Andrade reporting live for us from Abidjan, Ivory Coast. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, a look at South Africa's Kalahari Arts and Heritage Festival. We'll be right back.
For ladies in urban areas, social media is no doubt the place where their outfits and hairstyle choices will most likely be displayed at the end of the events they attend. As such, their fashion choices are not just for a group of close family friends to admire, but also up for judgment and appreciation by people around the world. Thus, lots of consideration is exercised. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we speak to fashion experts on how the best looks are coordinated and even on a budget. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, fighting in Sudan between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces has mostly spared the country's eastern region, and fragile peace in the area is in jeopardy. But the United Nations says 10 to 15,000 people have died in a single city in the western Darfur region. South Africa's Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor alleges Israel is ignoring the ruling by the United Nations International Court of Justice, which ordered Israel to do all it can to prevent civilian deaths in Gaza. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says that 150 people were killed in the territory in the last 24 hours. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will continue to do what is necessary to defend the country. And Egypt's economic crisis is squeezing high street brands such as Starbucks and The Body Shop amid a severe foreign currency crunch. The US dollar is scarce as the Egyptian pound plunges and inflation is surging at 35%. Egypt is highly indebted after years of heavy borrowing, including for a new capital city in the desert east of Cairo. In Mogadishu, the troubled capital of Somalia, elderly citizens gather every afternoon in the Bondera district for an archery contest. The activity is part of a deeper historical tradition. Jamal Ahmed Asman has more about this unique activity.
Yusuf Bali Mohammed is in his early 60s and has been practicing archery for over 2 decades. He was once a hunter. He shares the history behind his favorite pastime.
We chose archery because freedom fighters like Syed Mohammed Abdul Hassan use arrows and bows against the Ethiopian invading forces and other colonialists.
The target, a shoe, placed at a distance ranging between 200 and 400 meters. Some of these elders do not need glasses to hit the mark. Ali Hussein Ahmed Sandiri, a 63-year-old archer, has been practicing since he was 13 years old.
It is a tradition passed down from generation to generation. We inherited it from our fathers and grandfathers. Islamic scholars used to tell us that this was used for liberation, and we have to keep the practice.
Beyond the competition, these games are an opportunity for the elderly to get together as a community, Sandiri says.
It is not a gambling game. It is not about who lost or who won. We gather once in a while to have lunch, have fun, and pray to God for His blessings.
For these elders, it's a way to stay in touch with the past while exercising to stay young. For Jamal Ahmed Asman in Mogadishu, Somalia, Kevin Enochs, VOA News.
The 2023 Kalahari Arts and Heritage Festival, held in the Kalahari Desert, Northern Cape, South Africa, is being hailed by organizers as a resounding success. The unique event targets the almost extinct San and Khoi population. Festival visitors were entertained by 15 music, dance, poet, and drama groups from the San and Khoi communities. Tuso Kumalo has more.
Different San and Khoi cultural groups from parts of the Kalahari Desert in Namibia, Botswana, and Northern Cape in South Africa came to the festival prepared to demonstrate why their culture must survive.
We don't want this to die, for our culture to just fade. Our forefathers would have wanted us to do this, so yeah.
As part of the festival, a team of theatre directors visited the local community and school to ensure even the youth do not lose their self-identity in the midst of a world where many may have forgotten them.
This community here, it almost seems like a forgotten nation, a forgotten people, forgotten tribe. So the reason why we are doing this, it's for the purpose of the people, so that they may be able to stand up and speak for themselves.
In the evenings, campfires were lit. It's a key tradition for the San and Khoi people.
The fire was also a place where the people were sitting and telling stories. And this is how the culture was going from the generations, one another.
Language preservation was also a key element of this festival, causing excitement from young people who now largely speak Afrikaans. And youngsters got to watch short films they had been assisted to produce from their communities. Organizers of the festival are very happy with its success and look forward to even doing better on the next one.
Third year of the festival, and every year it was like a new experience, new challenges and everything, and it really helped us to every other year to try to do more than we do the first years.
Festival organizers say the event preserves and revives the hope of an entire forgotten nation and brings them joy.
There's the glitz, glamour, red carpets and all the bright lights in all other festivals that are held in big cities. But we believed that there was this niche or the gap to fill to ensure that people in the communities, more so the marginalized populations like the Khoi and San, need to own a festival that is intentionally based in the communities, reflecting their way of life, reflecting their values, reflecting their culture, and also preserving their heritage.
It's time to say goodbye for these performers from Namibia, Botswana, and different parts of South Africa. One thing will remain, though, in their minds about this festival: the culture, the dances, the music, and the coaching that they got on how to preserve their language. In the Kalahari Desert, Northern Cape in South Africa, this is Thuso Khumalo.
Thank you, Thuso, for that entertaining report. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.